I started looking into it closely, like trying to look for patterns in deceit and deception. And physiologically, when people are being less than honest, there's clear things that occur. All I'm doing as a behavior analyst is pointing things out and commenting on them. I have some critics out there that are saying, wait, are you analyzing them? I'm like, no, I'm just pointing things out that later prove to be lies. There's certain things people do. One of them is that they rarely will answer a yes or no question. This is patterns that I see, again, not everyone. So often people will start to talk in a very long circle and on a simple yes or no question. So you ask a yes or no and you look them in the eyes, they often will look away and go into a long song and dance, and then afterwards you have to say, was that a yes or a no or a maybe? And you don't know. And you could continue asking yes or no, and again, I don't like that moment, it's awkward, but it happens. Sometimes when they're being less than honest, they have a weird creepy smile on their face. Like that, not only do they not have the crow's feet, but it's just this weird like smile that's entirely fake, and it's at the wrong time. Have you ever seen that? Like people, like something's not, it's like they're uncomfortable, so they're smiling like really fake, like something creepy like that. You know what I mean? I've seen that a lot. So again, doesn't mean they're lying, it just means something might have made them uncomfortable. Other things, you do see fidgety behavior. People also sometimes, not everyone, but when people get uncomfortable, they'll often start to cross their arms and getting kind of hunch their shoulders a little bit. When it comes to eye contact, some people will actually unusually stare at you like in the eyes when they're lying. They're being less than honest. They stare at you and like really hard, more than usual, more than baseline. People around me that I know that when they're a little uncomfortable, I accidentally just see these things and I can't help it. I know each person that I see daily around the office. I know what their things are, and I try to stay away from it unless I really have to get to the bottom of something, and I'll ask a question, and sometimes they'll cover their face in their mouth, and they could be smiling under it, or they could be looking upset, or they're covering some part of their face because they're aware they have micro expressions and they don't want you to see them. On our interview question, and again, I just want to get a straight, honest answer. I didn't want to mislead. I didn't want the person to know what I want them to say. Because the person wrote on the survey, we grill the shit out of people we hire now. I don't know if you know that, but there's a lot of stages, and a lot of them don't get through the door because of the responses. I'm surprised this one got through the door, but I think Chelsea called them and asked them what they said, and they backpedaled. But it said in there, I will not do restraints. I don't agree with them. We'll never do them. Something like to that nature. And so in the interview, I'm glad that Jason pointed that out to me. So within my interview question, this stuff I don't really think about, it comes natural to me. But I started off the question, the way to get the most authentic answer. Now, if I said something like, are you not willing to do a restraint? That's a leading question. They're gonna say, no, I'll do it if it's needed, because they want the job. But I said, here's how I teed the question up. I said, I don't know if you noticed this, Jason. I'm like, I don't really like restraints at all. What do you think about restraint? You heard me say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like them. I wasn't lying, but I do them to keep the kids safe. She gave a good answer. It was a really genuine answer, I think. And she was like, I don't like them either, but they're necessary sometimes in an emergency. I'm like, okay, good. So it wasn't that she was against it, because we need to know if we're gonna hire someone who has a different belief in principles. Another common thing is that the latency between when you ask them a question, especially in the interviews, the latency between when you ask a question and their response. They could answer yes, no, or I'll get back to you, but there's this unusual pause beforehand. And that's a common thing that, again, you got to compare it to baseline when they're answering yes, no questions about something that's that they are comfortable discussing. As I'm watching these behaviors, people that are less than honest, they often speak in the second and third person and don't say I. Like the one I did of the previous Sean Spicer, Spicy, good old Spicy, was his response was every time he had to answer about the crowd size compared to Obama's crowd size inauguration, and he had to be less than honest about it on behalf of Donald Trump. His response was talking about, well, you know, when you're in front of the press, you do this, or we as the press corps, or we as part of the staffers have to protect the president. We, others have to do this, not I lied. See, this is why I can't get a lunch date. One common one is there's often, again, not everyone, but there's incongruence in the way they nod their head and answer the question. So if they're trying, if you watch some of the videos that I put out when we found out the person was lying, they would be answering a yes question by going like this. Yeah, that's the way it is. And it's very, again, not everyone, but there's a little bit of a pattern of that. Often their response will be their voice cracks because there's something on making them uncomfortable, and there's a physiological response and their voice is like, oh. Some people speak very formally suddenly. They start using words like shall, like they never friggin' talk that way, and all of a sudden they're like, I shall do this. I'm like, what the fuck? So it's less than honest. Someone might say, instead of saying, I didn't do it, they say, I wouldn't do that. There's a common pattern of that. Instead of saying, I did not do that, they say, I wouldn't do that. Another common response is just responding in an overly defensive way, like being offended and angry that the person asked that question. Sometimes, if they think that I won't like the answer they give is, what? Like literally. And it happens, and I'm like, and I wait, and the reason I know they heard me is because I don't repeat the question, and then they process it later, and then they answer it. I'm like, why'd you say what? So they were buying time to answer it. That guy in the one video was perspiring big time, to the point where, every time he made a lie, you'd see beads of sweat coming up, and he had to start wiping it with his hand. You could shake the person's hand, and then it's like a cold, sweaty feeling on their hand. Again, doesn't mean that they're lying, it just might mean they're uncomfortable. People, when they're being less than honest or uncomfortable, you ask them a question, and when they answer, they close their eyes like, well, it's like this. And they close their eyes. And that's a common one, just so you know. Also, in a lot of the videos I watch, I've scored them and saw that as one, where they close their eyes. When you ask them questions out of turn, like, can you describe what happened last, and then right before last, like backward chaining almost, they can't do it. And then the facts come out differently than when they tell the story forward. So that's a common, it's a little honesty hack in case you want to catch your spouse in a lie, where they really went. Why? We're in the field of behavior analysis, and why in the world wouldn't we want to understand when people are not being genuine with us? You know what I mean? Like, why not? Why the has this not been? Why is there not a whole ABBA group for this? The misconception, deception group. I don't know. Like there's a friggin' OBM group. There's now an ACT group, which is cool. Acceptance Commitment Therapy. There's why isn't there like a deception and lying? I mean, there should be.
There was one. Nobody believed.
Yeah. Nobody wants to get in that room. Like, oh shit, they busted me.